Well, good evening, everyone, and sorry to stop this piano bar cool ambiance, but I think it's time to get started. So, welcome to all of you here at this Auditoire Jacques Frémont. I'm a bit emotional because I think it's maybe 15 years. I haven't been in this auditorium anymore, so it reminds me of a lot of souvenirs. My name is Gilles Carbonnier. I'm the professor of development economics here at the Geneva Graduate Institute of International Development Studies. And I'm also in charge of a very exciting new executive course that we have put in place, which is named Nature Positive Economy. And it deals with driving the social and economic transformations required for sustainable prosperity. And we have the chance to have colleagues, participants, students to this course with us here. And I will co-facilitate this conversation together with my colleague, Dr. Jérôme Duberry, who is also here acting as co-director of the executive education of the Graduate Institute. And he's also the managing director of the Tech Hub of the Graduate Institute. Before introducing our two panelists, Dr. Bertrand Klaiber and Minna Epps, welcome. Let me, before presenting them and introducing them, giving the floor, Jérôme and me, we will briefly try to frame a bit the issue of this grandiose title of saying, well, will technology save us and the planet? And I've been remarked very rightly so that if we take, geological time or horizon, don't worry about the planet will take care of itself and will save itself without technology. But ourselves and other species, it's a different question. And I think that we are all wondering and wrestling with the issue of, well, technology has certainly been part of the problem. It's part of the solution, but we hear techno-optimists saying that technology will do the trick, and others thinking that it's just window dressing or greenwashing and that it won't help. Actually, what I did to start framing the issue, what do you do when you want to know if technology will save us? You consult artificial intelligence and ChatGPT. And ChatGPT says, while technology has the potential to significantly mitigate environmental challenges, it is not a panacea on its own. So with that, we are not very much advanced. But let's say that what I want to say that we are actually trying to see how technology interacts and innovations interact within societies and nature, and both societies and nature are complex adaptive systems. So there is no single solution to try to address the triple crisis of climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss. In such complex adaptive systems, we have to take an approach where we look at systems change, and this is very much what we have done in our executive training course on nature positive economy, looking at key systems such as energy, water, food and agriculture and nutrition, construction and housing, and also more globally patterns of production, trade, and consumption. Another important aspect to consider is that we have to see at different levels, considering what are the overarching global governance reform that is necessary, what are national domestic policies, regulations, markets, business, all the way down to individual behavior and lifestyles. After the fourth module of our course on nature positive economy, this one focuses on scientific advances and technology. And it appears that technology is a powerful enabler, but it's a powerful enabler for the better and for worse. At worst, we have heard from techno-optimists that tech solutions is a promise that we can just go on doing business as usual, and that actually by resorting to carbon capture and sequestration, storage, we don't need to care so much about moving out quickly out of fossil fuels. And others, critics, are saying this is a diversion of our attention on what we need to do. Now, when we look at tech advances in an obvious sector is producing renewable energy to replace fossil fuels and to look at the potential of solar, wind, hydro, and geothermal power. And we had a session yesterday on the potential and the risk of the hydrogen economy, trying to make sense of the differences and different impact of so-called green, blue, and gray hydrogen. Now, even renewable energies, they have also their environmental costs and footprint on nature, being just if we think of rare earth, critical minerals or lithium extraction, which raises environmental concerns, but also important social issues. And when we look at solutions, technological solutions from a political and economy perspective, these solutions imply redistributive impacts with losers and winners. And this is where introducing the notion of just transition, looking at the social impact of innovation that are not only technological innovation, but that often also imply social and institutional innovation is absolutely key. We also discussed very briefly, but here, Jérôme, I want to bring you in, how to tap into the very fast advances related to artificial intelligence and digital technologies, digital transformation with this regard. So maybe I would give you the floor to say a few words, introductory words on the topic.
Thank you very much. So very pleased to be here tonight. When I was taking some notes for tonight, my first reflections were on the title, actually. Will technology save us? And it's actually interesting because it's as if we were giving technology the responsibility to save us, or in a way almost the agency to save us. And this is a really provocative and interesting question because in the press and in some media, there is very much this narrative about technology being necessarily a progress, always a progress. And the question, we talked about this morning actually, but the question is the progress for who? And for whom? No? Who? And very often the answer to this question is, well, those who develop the technology or who design the technology, and has a direct impact on who benefits from that technology or who is harmed by the technology. The other point maybe to mention here briefly is the question about and the necessity to align the digital and the ecological transitions. So these two transitions are ongoing, maybe one more than the other, you will figure out which one, but they have an impact on each other. The digital transition has an impact on the environment, many impacts actually on the environment, on different parts of the world, of course on society as well. But the environment has also an impact on the digital transition because the resources are increasingly scarce and rare. And we'll talk about the ocean as well, and there's here a connection, the digital and the environment. So this is the other element that I maybe wanted to highlight. Again, mentioning our responsibility as human beings. It's not a technological question, it's a political, it's a governance question. And that's why I think the Institute and Geneva at large is the right place to discuss these questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jérôme, indeed. I think through also the executive course that you are in charge of, it's really looking deep into the governance and the political dimension of the digital transformation we are in. So now we have decided that to try to address the question in the title of our conference, we cannot look at all the sectors, and we have decided to focus and to offer 2 deep dives into first ocean conservation, and then the question of the dilemmas and challenges of shifting towards regenerative economies and society. So for that, we have the chance to have 2 outstanding panelists who have accepted our invitation. We have Bertrand Klaiber. Bertrand Klaiber has over 30 years of experience in clean tech and med tech industries at the EPFL, the Polytechnical School of Lausanne. He co-created the Essential Tech program back in 2012, harnessing tech and business for sustainable development. Then he founded and launched a startup dealing with teleradiology. And last year, Bertrand launched the Tech for Regeneration program at the EPFL Innovation Park. And I'm sure, Bertrand, that you will tell us more about it in a moment. Minna Epps. Minna is a marine biologist with over 20 years of experience in international marine and coastal conservation. Minna is the head of the IUCN Global Ocean Program, and as such, she has been in charge of, for IUCN, for a series of marine environmental agreements and negotiations. Minna chairs the Blue Natural Capital Fund, the Blue Carbon Accelerator Fund, and she serves as an advisor inter alia to the Blue Action Fund and the Sea Legacy. So with that, I think that we are very eager to hear whether technology actually has a huge potential to help solve some of the huge problems that we have with regard to ocean conservation and our pathway towards a regenerative economy. And let's start with you, Minna. You have the floor to walk us through your own thinking and sharing your knowledge about the issues at hand.
Yes, thank you very much. It's really my pleasure to be here. I actually started my career not too far here at the WTO on the fisheries subsidies 20 years ago. That hasn't really moved since. So there we go. International policy is slow. So as you said, my name is Minna Epps, and I work for IUCN, which is the International Union for Conservation of Nature. We were established in 1948 and generously hosted by Switzerland. We are an intergovernmental organization, and that means we have about 200 state agency members, but also civil society members, including indigenous peoples organizations. And then we are very lucky to have almost 18,000 experts and professors that are associated with us. That is kind of our knowledge base and expertise. And we have the latest commission, we have 7, is on climate crisis. We decided not to call it climate change because we need to call things what they are. So it's a climate crisis commission. We have on species conservation, etc. And I think one of the most flagship product is the red list. The red list of species and the red list of ecosystem is really giving the status report of our species, whether they're vulnerable, threatened with extinction, etc. And it's not really big. I mean, 37% of shark species are threatened with extinction. So it is sometimes is a very dark picture. But what we also do, we are also a standard setter. So we've set and developed a global standard for nature-based solution. I know we're here to talk about technology, but as a starting point, I think that nature-based solution, we really focused around 8 different criteria to address environmental and societal problems. And what I like about that is that it's not just looking at, climate, biodiversity, but it's also looking at what are the trade-offs. Because if you want to fix these global problems, like say climate change, it's going to have a local impact somewhere and probably on biodiversity. So we are looking at it from a kind of a holistic way, knowing that nature-based solution, nature alone cannot save it. So we need obviously technological solutions, etc. So I've also worked a lot on blue infrastructure, for example. And so we say, how can you merge those? So IUCN really uses it's a science-based organization. So we like to think of ourselves as interface between science and policy. And now I think we need to move much more into the tech to policy interface. So basically also merging, you know, the bureaucrats and the technocrats, for the better word of it. So that's kind of where we are. And my job is really to look at the ocean as a whole. And I think it's often forgotten. I mean, we are terrestrial animals. So if I could take a moment just to talk a little bit about the ocean, because it happens to be my favorite topic. We are living on a blue planet. 70% like to say with the surface area. But if you look at volume, this vast space, it is not over 90%, almost 95% in volume of this planet that is the ocean. It generates oxygen, it actually stabilizes our climate, etc. And we're talking about a triple planetary crisis, which you mentioned eloquently. And if you look at the biodiversity crisis, almost 90% of biodiversity you'll find in the ocean if you look at the microorganism, etc. If you look at the ocean, about 35% of the ocean could actually help fill the reduction gap in terms of CO2 reduction. But if you look at nature, all the nature we have, and look at the mangroves, etc., because not all marine ecosystem, for example, can be included in, you know, the UNFCCC, the policy. I mean, you remember the Paris Agreement, and we need to get to 1.5. So the ocean is really crucial in that policy space. Now, people are looking to the ocean as solutions, not just for the resources, etc., but a solution to the climate crisis. And what are we talking about here? The ocean, we have tempered a lot with its chemistry. So not only do we have warmer waters, we have ocean acidification, so we change the pH, which means all the oysters and the things that we love are really threatened. But then also ocean deoxygenation. So the average oxygen level of dissolved oxygen in the ocean has declined. And on an average, maybe 3–4%, and it doesn't sound like a lot, but in some areas, the ocean the deoxygenation or hypoxia is up to like 34%. So one hypoxic event can wipe out 75% of corals in Panama. And, you know, let's say we're like 500 different events. And just as on land, we have heat waves. In the ocean, we have heat waves as well. They're called marine heat waves. And it's a massive body of water with extended temperature of a longer period that moves. So how do we think? I mean, I'm trying to here now to make a transition over to technology. So that is the kind of chemistry in the ocean. And what we're saying now is like, okay, there's not enough mangroves or seagrasses to absorb all the CO2. Well, let's look at marine carbon dioxide removal. It can be the algae, that part, but it can also be geoengineering solutions. So that's one way that they're looking at this. If you look at the deoxygenation, for example, I think it's hard to imagine because if you are in an airplane and you're looking down on a forest and you can see it's been deforested, that's a habitat loss. But when the deoxygenation in ocean happens, we can't really see it. But that's a habitat compression. We are minimizing water. So if you take something like tuna or swordfish, fast-swimming species, they need a lot of oxygen because they have high metabolism. So they're pushed out. And so if you look at the Earth around the equator, you're going to have all this biomass migrating. So you're going to have a change in composition of species, distribution. But that's not just on the surface. We need to think of this as a three-dimensional space. And there's a lot of activity going on in the ocean. And you mentioned, for example, digital transition, but there's also the green transition to save this planet. So they're saying, okay, in order to have all those minerals, we're basing our economies on extractive industries. We need to go to the ocean, because in the ocean you have your polymetallic nodule. They only take 4 million years to form, but that's a minor detail. Saying that we need to go mine in the ocean, and there I think it's going to do nothing for the triple planetary crisis, because a lot of the biggest carbon storage is kind of locked in the ocean. So as I said, coming back now to the technology. So we are running a lot of challenges, like ocean challenges, tech innovation, for people to come up with the best ideas and solution and test them out. I think we've seen a lot of advances, obviously in satellite technology, et cetera, which has also helped, as I said, exacerbate the problem, because you can locate the resources easily, et cetera. We also have a lot of failures. If you look at the ocean, the three biggest threats are overfishing, pollution, and habitat destruction. So if you take the first one, fisheries, I mean, it's only in the last, since the 1950s, we really started advancing with the trawlers, and then hydroacoustic, we can locate it. But there was also a lot of scientific errors, because how do you estimate the population size of fisheries? I mean, fisheries is so important. It feeds, 17 of protein of the whole population of this world gets its primary source of protein from fish. Now, those fisheries, the stock that you have, a third of them are overfished. How do you estimate the population? And sometimes there are miscalculations. So you will literally go and look at egg samples, and then you do your models and extrapolate. But now we have eDNA, so you can actually get a lot of more information. So we need to have right data in order to kind of do those estimates. And never than before has it been more important to actually basically measure the impact we have on nature. So that's one thing of getting it right. There are technological advances that you can use, whether light, frequency, to reduce the bycatch. I've been out on boats with fishermen, and when they pull up their nets, like 50, 60, up to 80% can be bycatch, and it's discarded back to the sea. How wasteful is that? From the whole extraction to the whole supply chain and the infrastructure, there's a lot of efficiency that can be gained. But usually these technological advances are more expensive, the selective gear. And so, in the end, it comes back to the economic models to make that transition, because you don't want to lose profits. When it comes to AI, we're working a lot on AI and big data, because the ocean, which I mentioned, 2/3 of the ocean is beyond national jurisdiction. So how do you regulate, and what is the legal framework? What can you do? So we have, after almost 20 years of negotiation, the world came together, and in New York, they agreed and later adopted the High Seas Treaty. So what that treaty can do is basically, so that's 45% of our planet. So 2/3 of the ocean are areas beyond national jurisdiction. So Switzerland does have a piece of the ocean, because it's common heritage of humankind. So it means that it belongs to all of us, even the landlocked country. So that is where a lot of discovery is going to happen in innovation, in pharmaceutical, minerals, etc. So these are key. Even in COVID, the antigen, the rapid test that we took, that came from a hydrothermal vent at the microorganism. Was only discovered in 1977. I think when it comes to kind of the data and technology, there's so much data gaps in the ocean, but the ocean data in itself is a very big growing industry. So that's really key. You mentioned a little bit about regenerative economy. We need to move towards a regenerative blue economy, because if the ocean was an economy, I think it would be the 7th or 8th largest in terms of GDP. So that's where we see all those potential. So I think that we need to kind of also go slow, and in terms of AI, it's obviously based on a lot of information is available, and we don't have enough on the ocean. And also, how do we, I think the technology, if you speak to people, I was invited to Berkeley, they have a new data center, and all the technology people seem to think there was an app for every problem solution, but you need to think about the enabling condition. So one example would be, here on land, we have speed cameras everywhere, you can see it, and it's not much different. We have a lot of technology that can track and monitor, but you're just seeing trends, because the burden of proof, it's like on sea, is the reverse. So if I were to make an illegal U-turn here and I would be caught, I would be fine. I'll probably just get a fine sent to my letterbox, because the car is registered in my name. If you're on the ocean, you can track. We can go online now into Global Fishing Watch, and we can see all the boats that are fishing illegal. So why are we letting that happen? We're wasting billions and billions in taxpayer potential revenue, because we are all this illegal activity that goes on in the ocean. And we have the technology to actually track and find it. But what we need is to have the enabling conditions to make it. So how can a boat get speeding boats? We can save a lot of biodiversity. If you go down on holiday in the Mediterranean, you want to jump to the different islands, and people want to get the tourists there fast. If they would just slow down the speed, they would have less coalition with whales. So the technology really, for a lot of things, is there, but I think we need to have much more thinking about the enabling conditions from the policy and the legal aspect. So I could go on, but I would really like to hear what the others have to say, and happy to come back to any specific. But as you said, it's a very, very big topic. Thank you.
Minna, thank you very much. But just before moving to Bertrand, just to push you on one thing, I understand that data analytics has a big role to play. I guess it's data provided by satellite imagery or data that can be produced via drone with sensors and the likes, but also data that is collected directly from, for instance, coral reefs, etc., including with DNA, etc. But you mentioned something which is worrying, which is to say, well, this data can be used both for, and if we look at agriculture, for instance, we are speaking of precision agriculture, using this data to reduce the water use, using this data to reduce pesticide use, and being more efficient and effective in increasing agricultural yield. But in the case of these vastly unregulated waters that you referred to, how much do you see this data being actually put to use now to better understand and being better, more efficient and effective in protecting marine biodiversity and redressing what needs to be redressed? Or to the contrary, how much do you see this as being used by those already causing overfishing?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And also to say, that is all connected. So I talked about deoxygenation. Well, actually, there's climate-driven deoxygenation, but the primary cause for the dead parts or deoxygenate is actually from runoff from agriculture. So whatever you can do on land to fix that problem, you're talking about reducing pesticide, will have a positive impact, because in the end, it ends up in the ocean. And when you talk about pollution, there are a lot of technological solutions. If you take plastic, you can replace it, not just look at the digger, but you can have algae as instead of plastic. So you can actually do there's been a lot of technological advances there. But in terms of how the data is used, I think if you're going to get data, deep ocean data, etc., I mean, it's actually quite expensive. Usually the research is funded by, commercial interests, so the data is not accessible. Or so we're trying also to advocate for something that's called, the FAIR principles, that data needs to be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, but also care, to look at also taking in consideration the indigenous knowledge, so to say. So there is a lot of data out there, and one thing that's part of this agreement is 3 parts. One is to be able to do marine protected areas, but then everybody's go, but how, we don't even have coast guards to protect our own national waters. How are we going to protect the marine? But I said, that's where technology comes in. But I think it's not just having technology, because I think the whole green transition and the key point in all these international negotiations is the divide between the global north and the global south. So also having not just having access or providing a technology, you need to build a lot of capacity to get everybody on the same playing field. So I think the data is available, but there's also a lot of data piracy. So how can you actually make the data available for those countries, et cetera? But not only, you don't just need be able to use technology, you need to invest in a lot of education and training and the analyst to process and to make use of this data. And to your point, I think we've seen this on land, that when you can exactly locate, because people say, everybody can be fishermen. Here's a new data application, so you can track and see where the fish are. Well, depends, who has access to that app, right? And how it's used. So I think it's both ways, but part of this agreement is 4 things. So it's being able to establish marine protected area, because at the moment there's no legal framework or mechanism to do that. Second is environmental impact assessment. Thirdly is the marine genetic resources. And that's really key as well when you talk about having access and benefit sharing. And fourth is the transfer of marine technology and capacity building. That's a major, major point. And of course, again, that needs to have a lot of investment. But I think it also comes down to a question of equity. So there is a lot of data being available, but it's not accessible. And I'm not talking about poor communities in Africa. I'm talking in general outside the commercial sector, because they have a lot of the data. That answers your question. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Minna. So, Bertrand, you have created last year Tech for Regeneration. And being at the EPFL Park, I'm sure that the question of how much can technology save us and the planet is heart and center of all what you do. Can you please walk us through your own learning trajectory and what you can bring and share with us about where you stand?
Yes, sure. It's working, yes. Thank you. Yes, it's obviously a question we ask ourselves every day because we develop technology, and if we can save the world, we have a high pressure on our shoulders, especially because many politicians like to say they invest in technology, though they will save the world, and many people like technology because it's an optimistic way of looking at the problem we have. So, but maybe I want to just to describe who we are, maybe. EPFL Innovation Park is one of the biggest innovation park. It's not EPFL, it's close to EPFL. And the mission of the park is a non-profit foundation with a mission to bring scientific innovation to the society, to the economy, with an impact on society and the planet. To do that, we cannot use the public money of EPFL. We are paid by companies, which is a good thing because we have to respond to needs of the economy. We should have more companies like IUCN, for example, involved because we should also respond more to the needs of the planet and the society. So this is why we try also to have in our stakeholders, in our governance, people like you, and I think it would be good to discuss. Why regenerative economy is important? Why did we launch that last year? It's interesting because we are technologists, but I've read a lot of books on the regenerative economy, and as an entrepreneur, I say, wow, I would love to have those books 20 years ago because it's when you read them, it's an obvious move for the economy if we want to survive. But how do we do that practically? How can we achieve? And this is a big question, and this is what we try to address with this new program, Tech for Regen. So, and I want also to give our definition of the regenerative economy, because there are many, so that you understand also maybe the direction we take. So we started from characterizing the need, because developing technology should respond to a need, and for us the best starting point was the planetary boundaries. Scientists have been able since years to quantify the problem with the planetary boundaries to show that the breaches there are more and more breaches, there are 6 now. And this is what we take as a guiding star to our developments. What means those planetary boundaries? It means that there are instabilities. It means that our economy is at risk. We don't know exactly how, but there is a depletion of natural resources, scarcity of fresh water, of fertile soils, and many things. So, we know that business as usual will not be possible anymore, and we have to rethink the whole economy. We had program for sustainability since a while, but we realize also that sustainability, even if every single company would be perfectly, totally sustainable, is not enough, because we have crossed some limits and we need to restore them, to regenerate them. So the regenerative economy is not just, it's built on sustainability, because sustainability is mandatory, but it's really to go one step further to find a new stable and safe situation between the society and the planet. So it's complex because there are 9 planetary boundaries, and one of the dangers is to look only at one of them, and this is what we try to do. If you like, many institutions focus on the specific matters, and I don't say that for ocean because it's part of the thing, but this is also the problem of the universities, because we are very specialized in some specific issue, and we are not ready anymore to tackle the problem as a whole. And if I take an example, many people tackle the carbon, the green gas emission, because it's the easiest one to quantify. We have technologies, we have solutions, but we need to look at the other one. Look, you mentioned ocean acidification will have an effect on the climate, like many other ones, though it's not possible to separate the things. And if I just give an example also to illustrate that, Carbon capture, there are some instruments, financial instruments, the carbon credit, the voluntary market to finance biodiversity, the biodiversity project. This is a very nice tool, even if it needs improvements. But the problem, if we don't do that well, if we don't use well the tool, it can be very counterproductive. Look, we planted a lot of trees to capture carbon, which and we reported a very positive impact on that. But this was done to the detriment sometimes of some very complex biodiversity ecosystem. Some people, I don't remember who told that, but we are just burning a library from which we have read only 10% of the books. And this is exactly what happened. And sometimes it happens for the good cause, because we plant trees to capture carbon. We use pesticides because they grow up faster, and then you cannot plant any, you cannot feed the population locally. Though it's really important to look not only at carbon but pollutions, water, biodiversity, the local population, and to have a global assessment of the impact. So it's not simple. This is why we should not work in silos. So I come back to our definition of the regenerative economy, because it's really important before understanding the role of technology. And I really like, because it's really important to have models, and I like the models of the donut from Kate Raworth. Sorry for the pronunciation, but she shows in the donut inside the needs of the society. So we need the technology, and the economy needs to find solutions for the communication, education. We need energy, we need transport, but we need to do all that while keeping the environment safe and still productive. So when we look at that, technology obviously can try to reverse some breaches. Some of the technology can be directly regenerative. This is the case in agriculture, for example. But if we look again only at some of the aspects, we will invest all in agriculture and nothing in energy, because energy cannot be regenerative by definition. It cannot be carbon neutral. So this is why, again, it's important to look at all the fields of the industry, transportation, energy, because they all play a role in developing a globally regenerative economy. And this is what is important, because if we have a regenerative project, it's not enough. We really need to be more global. I can take, I wanted to say some example, but one of the big questions also, because if we want to develop some technologies for that, is who will pay for that? So there are more and more innovation, more and more investment in new technologies, startups that can be regenerative. And this is good, because it's better to invest in new technology than to pay for the impact of degeneration, the climate change, and all the issues. But the big problem is that even if we invest more in regeneration, there is a big loss of earnings if we stop investing in the traditional models. What I mean by that is, if we want, I give just two examples. If we want to stick to the 1.5 degrees increase to mitigate the climate effect, this means that 60% of oil and gas should remain under the earth. It means that 90% of the coal should remain under the earth. So this is a huge loss of earnings, and it's very difficult to convince politicians or multinationals not to touch those resources because they would lose too much money. The same, I take another example. There are more and more investment in I mentioned the voluntary carbon credit market, the reforestation, and we are now around 2 billion, or a bit more than 2 billion every year invested in reforestation projects. But at the same time, there are 10 times more invested in deforestation to get wood. So again, if we look at regeneration without looking at the big picture, it's a big issue. And the question I have, it's how can we find a way to go with another model and to leave all the oil and gas under the earth, to find alternative to the petrochemicals materials, to to find a more circular economy. And this is where innovation can play a key role. It's not an incremental, it's really, the technical innovation should be at the service of new models. So for example, now there are companies developing more a leasing model. Instead of selling products, they will lease them. So we need new technologies. We need digital technologies to develop this model. We need recycling, repairing the device. We need to design the devices so they fill this model. So this is really the point is we need technology that allow to have business models that are attractive for the consumer, that are cost effective for the companies, and that will divert the traditional economy from the take, make, and waste traditional model. So this is really what guide us in developing the technology. But for that, we need to understand also the new business model. We need to understand how we can go on the market with, and this takes time. So I come to the same conclusion that you. A technology can change the things, but it will not if we don't change the legislation. The infrastructure, look at hydrogen. Hydrogen, we have many nice startups, but if we don't develop all the infrastructure we need to deploy hydrogen, it will never have a big impact. The legislation, we have, for example, startups. I just give you some example to illustrate that, but we have 2 startups at EPFL developing solar panel for agricultural fields, which is very fine because they can at the same time use the sun for the crops and to generate energy. The problem, they are between 2 legislation, and they are not allowed to put such infrastructure due to the agricultural legislation. And I see entrepreneurs that are doing some lobbying, trying to change the legislation. This is not their task, so this is what we are trying to do. And we need to change the finance also. We need to find, you've done some very nice job at IUCN by contributing to the new taxonomy, and this is also influencing the Green Deal in Europe. And so we need really to influence the finance so that we attract more money. So this is what we do. We really try to make a bundle of technology with all the other aspects that are needed to bring it to the market. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bertrand. Before we open to the question and answer, I'm sure Jérôme might have a follow-up question, especially as you mentioned AI and technology. And my question is just, I understand that you have selected some 20 startups, companies to be supported by Tech for Regeneration. If you could just say in a few words, what were the criteria for selecting these 20, and what are the promise and some of the hurdles in securing that these startups are successful and make an impact? But maybe Jérôme, if you want to add also a question before we open up.
Thank you, Gilles. I just had a question about if you had information about tech regeneration from the global south. If you had some ideas or examples, maybe of innovation happening there, or how we could foster innovation there.
Yeah, I would take the 2 questions separately if you don't mind. The first one, we are learning, we are a laboratory, and we selected startups are a wonderful laboratory because they test things much faster than corporates. They are reacting faster. They are very smart, and so I think we learn a lot with startups. So first, we learn a lot from them, and we selected startup that already had the technology validated in a laboratory. We are not here to help them to develop the technology, but we are here to see how we can help bringing this technology to have an impact on the society. And this requires some communication, some more marketing, we need to finance the development and industrialization. Industrialization, it needs a lot of infrastructure, and then develop the sales, the business model, and all that. So this is the first thing. And the 20 startups we selected, we wanted to explore 3 domains, very different domains, because the economy is basically done of 3 things. It's flow of materials, flow of energy, and flow of data. But even if the startup in the different fields look very different, we wanted them to work together because every single business model needs some materials, some energy, and some data. So it's very important to consider the three impact on how innovation sometimes often comes from the way we combine the three. So this is to answer the first question. I could tell more, but I will stop there. And the question for the Global South is very important, especially for me, because I developed this program and I've been working in Africa and Asia for many years. And when I look at the famous donut, it's interesting because I've seen a graph from the same people that made the planetary boundaries, and you can see where each country stands. And a country like Switzerland is very good in filling the societal needs in terms of education, feeding the population, all that. But we are among the worst in terms of the impact on the planetary boundaries. And this is also important because if I take the green gas emission, for example, 1% of the planet emits 66% of the emissions. And those emissions, they have more impact in the south because this is where we see the first effect of the climatic change. But also, our prosperity is done because we use a lot of resources, a lot of labor from those countries. So we have a moral responsibility because our wealth was built to the detriment, and we will see more and more. So coming back to your question, there are nice innovation because people in the south know better than us what works there. There are some nice innovations, but to scale, there is something we have more here. It's all the economic and industrial network we have. This is very important. A startup, I've seen some very nice and smart startup and innovations in Africa. They were not able to scale because they don't find electricians, they don't find people to build the things, they don't find people that know the quality system, how to make something last, and so on. So this is why I think one model could to bring such people here in Switzerland or in Europe to help them with to take their innovation and to see how we can help them to scale because we are good at that. And then also to bring some of innovation developed in the north and to see, I've been working a lot with a Swiss company trying to develop the business in southern countries, and 99% of the case you fail if you don't work with local people that know how to develop the operation locally. So again, it's a partnership. So I think it's the key is to work together.
Thank you. So let's take a few questions and comments from the audience. And Jérôme, you can also think because I didn't ask if you had a question for Minna, so you can have one after that. Let's open for questions and comments. So we can start here.
Can you hear me? Yes.
Oui, mais nous sommes au-delà de l'officialité. Voilà.
First of all, thank you very much. It's been very comprehensive. I tell you what I do like this, you understand where my question is coming from. So I work at the World Economic Forum and I engage business in nature positive initiatives for our nature pillar. And I think that you answer unanimously that the answer to this question is yes. Can technology save us and the planet? And we have to understand how. A missing stakeholder that I couldn't hear too much talking in your conversation is the private sector, of course, even though the private sector is a stakeholder that I didn't hear too much. And the private sector that we engage is very, very interested in market-based instrument to finance technologies and technologies that then would help nature-based solutions. So my question is, what are, Bertrand already mentioned, for example, carbon markets, but what are other market-based instruments to foster technologies and to increase actually the financing from the private sector? Thank you.
Can we take suppose if there were a comment on that? Okay. So
any other questions?
Okay. So here's another question, perhaps for you, Gilles. If you look at how humanity has evolved over the past few centuries, there's of course a very, very, very strong link with how finance has developed, and banking industry, and what we can do with finance. I remember from this book about the Ministry of the Future. I presume some of you have read. There's a number of financial innovations. For example, it started with carbon coin, supported by all central banks, whereby if you keep your oil on the ground, therefore you get so much carbon coin, etc., etc. So don't you think that there's also a lot to look into when it comes to the problems we're facing and the role of finance that needs to be not incremental, but actually probably needs to take a number of exponential jumps of the type of the carbon coin that Stanley Robinson is thinking in his book, The Ministry for the Future?
Another one?
Yeah, thank you very much. I have a question for Bertrand, because you mentioned that certain sectors could never be regenerative and others could be regenerative. You mentioned 2 examples, but I was wondering if you could mention more, look more into what sectors could be regenerative and which ones not.
So we had, sir, if you try to read.
It's a lot of.
So it's a lot. So let's keep your question for the second round, and let's go back to the speakers for the questions, and maybe Jérôme, you can also ask a question to Minna.
So you do the first 2, I do the finance one.
Okay. The first, if I understand well, the question was how marketing. You mentioned marketing, right?
Market-based instruments like carbon markets, for example, that can be used to finance technology and to involve the private sector.
Okay.
There are others.
It's key because technology without a business model will have no impact. It's interesting because I've seen since 15 years a shift between social entrepreneurship and impact entrepreneurship, and at the beginning, if you are too dependent on philanthropy and donations, when there is an economic crisis, you get no more funding. This is the first thing that we cut in generally. So the more sustainable model would be the one that are profitable, and this is also linked. And even impact investors, most of the time, they want profitability to be sure that the business can scale and have an impact. So for me, the market is really important. So developing the technology is, if the technology is too expensive to use, like I mentioned, I come back to my example. If you have new source of energy, alternative to oil or gas, it need to be cost effective. Otherwise, people stick to the traditional. You see in Switzerland, I've seen that now people are buying less heat pumps because and this is linked to several factors. First, there are some incentives. The oil, for many decades, it has been exempted of taxes because it was fueling the economy, the industry. And we need now to develop substitute to that, but we need to invest. So we need also some investment from the government and from the market. And the financial sector has a key role to play. And if I understand well your question, I think it's how we can also incentivize the investor or the financial institution to invest in green project. And there are some instruments like I mentioned the carbon credit is one instrument, the green bonds. So there are a lot of instruments that begins to be developed. And for me, I like also the philosophy behind the Green Deal that is developed, because the goal is really to have a matching fund between private and public sector to also increase the possible return on investment from the market. But it's a vast question, though. I'm sorry, I'm going very quickly on it because we could speak hours on that. And this is one of the topics, one of our key topics. So we have a seminar. We work with banks on that and the role of technology in that, because when we speak about blockchain, carbon credit, obviously there is technology behind that, and we also look at how technology can support those new financial instruments.
Stay on finance?
Maybe I think on finance, you have worked a lot on blue finance. So I think on the question of Juan would be very interesting to have also your view based on your experiences with regard to all the way, you know, from the debt for nature swaps that we have seen when in the case of Ecuador, if I remember well, but many other innovations. And I think the question is really how do you come up to scale and make a, you know, exponential increase of what we heard about, you know, sustainable finance, which remains too much of a niche.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. Just to say on the private sector and investment, I mean, I think when it comes to the transformation, we identified 5 sectors. So the shipping, the tourism, your aquatic food, but also blue natural capital. But I think what is missing that we really need to address, and all these planetary crises, is the financial mechanism. And it's not, we have the Desgupta report, but it talks about the economy. I mean, you're not talking about the finance. And you know, how you know, it's really, it's market development. So what we did, and to your point, is like, how do you get these innovation, market access, for example? So we created the Blue Natural Capital Funding Facility. It wasn't just nature-based solutions, some were hybrid. And what we did is like you were then giving them that investment to kind of get that, but it's very early stage. So you need a lot of your incubators, accelerators, et cetera, to go through the whole spectrum. What we did see is that it was global and it was open. We tried to have it for the different regions. But what we saw was probably maybe Dutch companies, et cetera, young entrepreneurs wanting to have market access to Asia, et cetera. So how do you actually build? You need that kind of cohort of developers to invest in them. And that's where their technical assistance or facility to invest in. But in terms of like, how do we talk, when we talk about sustainable finance innovative mechanisms, some of you might know that in Colombia and Cali was the 6th conference and party. They finished and they didn't conclude on the finance. I mean, you know how much it takes to get 190 plus countries to agree on global targets. So the global biodiversity framework. But what about the funding? Where's it going to come from? So it needs to be private, needs to be philanthropy. We have lots of private-public partnership. But how do you actually get that the financing mechanism right? So interestingly, so then they set up a new fund, because I have to take the ocean as an example because that's what I know. But if you look at the high seas, people think, oh my God, it's going to cost so much to manage that. But it's also a lot of potential revenues out there. I mean, user fees. I mean, people don't pay to fish, right? I mean, there's user fees, there's access fees, there's levies, royalties. For example, the IMO is going to introduce this levy or tax. Of course, most of those things are going to go back to the industry. But if you can take part of that for kind of marine conservation and have the right financial mechanism to kind of accelerate that investment. So interestingly, I've spent this whole week in Geneva with a group of people trying to think up before the UN Ocean Conference, because whatever targets or things you come up with, unless you move the finance needle in a very decisive manner, it's game over. I'm sorry to be so pessimistic. So, for example, you could develop like a global ocean entity, like a One Ocean Finance Facility that can have all this inclusive, so you can look at the sources, which are kind of the potential revenue sources, basically industry. And then you have the users, where does it go? And how can it be, again, kind of regenerated and the co-benefits, but also the financial mechanism. And if you get the financial mechanism right, then I'm not saying you don't need industry, but if you get it into the right financial flows, it could be. So that's one of the big challenge that we're trying to see, creating that bank with the financial mechanisms. So that's, you need to go from the infant stage all the way. Yeah, I don't know if you wanted to.
Yeah, if I can just add something. I think what's important, there is a need for some political support to put that in place. And the problem is that now we create a debt because nobody feels much concern about that debt for our children and for the next generation. And I think it's key that some people try to quantify, from an economically point of view, the debt that we are creating. It will be the cost of recovering, the cost of the climatic events and all that. And if we can quantify the consequences of our traditional model, then we can point it and the politician will be responsible for it. But as long as it's too abstract, The finance is more short term and not really considering this debt. So
you can't price bad data, but you mentioned biocredit, other economic instruments. Sorry, you mentioned carbon credits, but they're also talking about biocredits. And we didn't get the carbon right. This is even a bigger challenge, right? And it sounds good, but it's very complex. And many people would even be critical and say it's a hoax because it's just diverting. It's not really investing. And just as one example, which I think is also quite observed, so we've identified that plant-based economy of sources for food is much better than meat, for example. But then what do? We can't, because you talk about changing, the market enables legislation, but it's also the human behavior that we need to change. So instead, we invest billions of dollars. I was in Davos last year, and I was presented with this lab-grown steak. It was hard to swallow, and I'm looking at it thinking that's cost like tens of thousands of dollars just to produce that. But all the R&D that went into that, and imagine if it went into education, some ocean literacy or something long-standing. So we are kind of also obsessed with always developing new markets and new products, and I don't think it's going to save our planet, but finding that kind of solution. So I think it also need to think of it in a holistic and very ethical way. So, yeah, how we solve our problems.
Yeah, coming back to consumption patterns and how you go adapt behavioral change, which is something we have discussed also quite at length in a former module. I propose to go for a second and final round of comments, questions, and then we'll close, but the conversation can go on informally. We'll have a few drinks and snacks waiting for us after that, so you will be able to continue the conversation. But I propose if you can just wait for the second round of questions and comments, and then we'll have a final.
There was one question not answered.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, take it in the second round then.
Thank you very much for a presentation. I have, if I may, I have two questions, one related to ocean, simply, do you envisage any emergence of any governance mechanism concerning seabed mining? Because those who have technology and power, they do it, and we don't know how far they may go. And my second question is about, well, not related, it's related to technology and innovation, but more to finance regarding cryptocurrency. As you know, Bitcoin has reached almost $100,000. Well, it is, but still there are a lot of mistrust about this currency. And to produce Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies, a lot of energy is consumed. And sometimes in some countries causes blackouts, and the energy comes from fossil fuels, no matter fossil fuels or hydroelectric or so on. Do you think that would be sustainable? Of course, well, there are a lot of distrust because it's not related, it is not representing any physical asset, nor it is supported by any government. So would it be sustainable from environmental and financial?
Having very bad hearing, there is little I can learn from people who talk a lot. But still, if I came across the whole town to attend this session, it's because I have a burning question in mind. And since I'm not going to hear the answer, it will remain burning for years. The civil society is very vocal about climate issue when it boosts their constituency of victims. But as soon as you come with positive, constructive, technical answer, they feel like if an aggression. I have witnessed that at the so-called GESDA meetings. In Lausanne, at UNIL, you have an expert in geoengineering, I think, Søren Erkman. I never saw him invited once in 20 or 30 years in any debate issue. You know better than I do that nuclear plants, power plants, even with fusion, civil society activists don't want to hear of it. So my question is is the debate fair, or is it a shadow puppet theater where everybody is trying to develop her power base, and that the real issue of climate, which is really a serious issue, is in fact rarely very addressed?
One more question maybe, and then anyone?
Hi, I'm Maurizio from the Nature Positive executive course that Gilles referred to. So my question is, are there maybe blind spots that in terms of challenges that could be addressed by tech but are maybe overlooked? Just a very simple question.
Jérôme, will you start and also take the crypto questions? I think you could also say a few words about that.
I'm also mindful of the time, so I'll answer very quickly. For the cryptocurrencies, there are different models. So Bitcoin is one type of blockchain, which indeed, and you're absolutely right, has a very strong environmental impact and uses a lot of electricity. But you have other types of blockchain that have a lower or not such a big environmental impact. So the question is, okay, if we keep Bitcoin, can we change the type of blockchain technology that is used to secure the production and distribution of the coins? So I'll stop here and.
Sorry, yes. So your question on deep seabed mining. So on the areas beyond national jurisdiction, that's common heritage of humankind. So there is actually the United Nations Convention of the Law, which was established more than 40 years ago. It has a specific international seabed authority. And it's quite a challenge because it's almost like a church divided, right? So there you are, the mandate is to both explore, eventually exploit, but also to protect. And at the moment, so that means it's like the court is in Jamaica. So all the countries are invited there to come, but they don't have the full UN members. Usually the ones who come or show up are the ones who has a commercial interest. So you have to be sponsored by a state. But then there could be market developers that they can influence a small state like Nauru, and they can put forward. And at the moment there are it's not a commercial industry yet. It is basically only exploration licenses, but all of them have been approved. There are about 33 of them, and it's kind of like an area of 1.5 square million kilometers, so more than the size of Mongolia. And these are really critical also areas, and it's like when you referenced the library. Very, very little known about the deep sea and the potentials, what we can get from there. So there is that governance in place. It hasn't started. So they meet 2-3 times a year to kind of discuss, and what is lacking is the actual environmental regulations to do that. There are some loose ones for exploration, but there's not for exploitation. And of course, it's quite challenging because there's many different governance bodies. So if you look again at the water column, what you do in deep seabed mining might have on the water column, it might affect the fisheries and the mesopelagic. So these all instruments got to come together. So in the High Seas Treaty, which is the biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction, it's not like an umbrella, but these instruments has to work together. But at the moment, there's not enough scientific evidence. And if you talk about technology, so there's no sovereign state, just one state has the right to go there and mine. And if you're thinking about mining at the depth of 4,400 meters, it is actually not economically viable as now. And then you have to develop the whole industry and supply chain and even talk about sustainability. So the first thing is that they need to negotiate these regulations. So you can't do that at the moment. So we're hoping, and we are advocating for a moratorium on deep seabed mining.
Yeah, I just want to add on that because you mentioned cryptocurrencies and artificial intelligence, and there are other effects of digitization like 5G network. Now all our devices are connected, and this has a huge environmental impact. So it's part of the solution because digitizing the business model can prevent building some goods, and but it has a huge impact, not only in terms of carbon footprint, but we use some material to build the terminals, we use some water to cool. So it's a big issue. And EPFL, there are a lot of research financed by the Microsoft, Google, and that on the building some data technology for data centers. But also another aspect is also to change the behavior of the people, because if everybody is looking at some video and using AI and it's free, as long as it's free, it will really damage the situation. So people have to understand the real cost of it, and we have to find some way. We work with many computer companies and phone companies too. So we have more questions than solutions, but this is one of the hottest topics I can tell you we have in the regeneration economy.
And just on the question.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So
because you had two questions, I think, unanswered somehow.
So just to answer your question, because I'm not sure I understand well the question, but you mentioned Søren, the professor Søren from Ekman. So for me, I remember I've read his book long time ago, and I read it again now, because he was a visionary professor, I think, developing the concept of the industrial ecology. And I think it could look more obvious now, but 30 years ago, he said that we are in an industrial world. It's not realistic to, we speak a lot about sufficiency, degrowth, but it's not realistic. We have to, our drugs, our device, everything is done by the industry. But it's really interesting to explore how our industry can be more sustainable, how it can be more circular. So he has a lot of concepts that are not new that we start implementing now. I think this is very good. And your question was more on energy, right?
No, it's more on the good faith or bad faith of most actors in this issue.
Yeah.
In my experience, the civil society, which is so revered and praised by everyone, and if you don't say hallelujah, you are considered a villain, is basically the vehicle of fake news and demand for money. And so you cannot have a fair debate, especially on such urgent thing like climate, if your real agenda has nothing to do with fair and scientific answers, but just cashing on obscurities. You know, a lot of these people think that, for instance, hydrogen you pluck on trees. They have never heard of the law of conservation of energy, and they don't care. So how can you debate? You know, I have not heard a word of what you said, but I know that you are fair and honest, because I attended a whole week meeting by IUCN at Palexpo a few months back, and this was fair, open, and real and genuine. But otherwise, it's the exception which confirms the rule.
So you see, that's really the role of also academia, and this is what we try to do every day here, is to, and also with the courses that we are given, is to confront people, students, young people, to the different epistemologic foundations that people have, to different ideologies, to debate, but to look at what science has to say. And as we know, this is often normatively loaded, and that's very important that we have these open debates where we bring these different views and try to always bring the academic voice, which should be scientific grounded and looking at solutions. So thank you for that. You have a...
Can I just make a quick answer on that? Because I think there is a very important point behind this question, is that the voice of scientists is less and less here. I think it's an important role we have is to give more power to the voice of scientists, a voice of science. If you look at the debate now, the debate, the political debate, the marketing, we don't trust, we don't listen to scientific. So I think it's really important to bring more marketing in science and to bring a clear message. And I have many examples. So I think it's your point is important, and there are a lot of efforts that are done now.
Okay, so I think that we will be able to continue the conversation over drinks and snacks in the villa next door, in the Villa Bertrand. I just like to conclude by something that I said repeatedly to the students participating in the nature positive economy. We see that these systems change. It's a bit like with the Rubik cube. Every time we think, oh great, we align 3 green spots and we improve the thing. Oh, on the other side, side effects emerge, and what was a good idea is maybe not such a good idea. So to approach this through systemic thinking is to embrace complexity, but we try to clarify things so that it's not overly complicated, so that it does not paralyze action. And I think that with technology, it's a fantastic field of research, but I would like to thank our 2 panelists in particular for coming here, not only from research, but from action, and to share with us very candidly what you see as the potential and really benefits of harnessing technology for sustainable futures, but what are also the risks and the pitfalls. And with that, I wish you all a very good evening, and thanks a lot to our panelists.